have the 007 of healers on with us today. Oh my gosh, so excited. Adam Gornall. Is that how I say it correctly, Gornall?
Yeah, I mean, it has a few pronunciations. That'll work. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Midwestern. I'm Minnesota girl, so we have an accent that's pretty heavy, and I know you have an accent as well, and I love the Brit accent always. I'm excited to have you on the show. We love our healers, our coaches. There's always a special spot on this show for that because I am all about sharing the stuff, talking about trauma. One of my biggest things was a takeaway. We had a women's event last week, and we want to normalize talking about trauma. I want to take all this weird stigma away. I want, for men especially, because what I'm learning is now that I'm a newly single woman, my friends, a lot of my male friends that I talk to, they have just as much trauma, or if not more, and they hide it and they suppress it, and it comes out in all these different ways. So, I mean, I can go through your bio for ever and ever. I mean, you have done some incredible things. Former Royal Marine Commando. That was interesting. Thank you so much for your service. But mentored, coach, I mean, you do it all. So I want you, for our viewers, to kind of hear a little bit about you, your background. In the nutshell, you know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us who you are and what you're up to right now. And we'll go into a little bit of interview.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. 007, right. You set me off on the right tone there then. No pressure.
Nope.
Okay, so I like things shaken, not stirred. And obviously, in the true 007 sense. No, I served in the Marines for a decade. And that was just over a decade ago that I left. And since then, I've been on a pretty wild journey. It first went into the security industry in a predictable kind of way, really. Once you leave the Marines, there's certain channels that open up to you, and they tend to be quite limited and specialist. So I did that for a bit. I did a particularly interesting job in the Middle East for about 5 years. I was consulting out there with their military, and it was out there that I met a woman that completely turned my life upside down in the best possible way. She literally liberated and gave me permission to finally tap into who I am. And we were together for 5 years, and yeah, it opened my eyes to what it is that I really wanted to do. And it was service. It was always service, but it wasn't necessarily in the form of military service. That was my highest calling. As grateful as I am that I did it. But I then went into the realm of serving others through coaching. But it started off really as teaching. I was quite adept at teaching. And that led me into mentoring, and that led me into consulting, and eventually setting up my own coaching practice. But now I'm qualified as a therapist using hypnotherapy in my practice, trauma-informed also, and I have a particular keen eye for relational dynamics, having gone to Boulder, Colorado, for about 5 months, where I embedded with a group there, where they just did what we would call Jedi shadow work, and it was quite an intense experience, but liberating in many ways. And so I incorporate that into my coaching and my practice as well. So
I like that. So I love that you used Jedi. I think that's cool. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I grew up with Hollywood. Star Wars is my gig. I always say, if I'm going to date an older man, it has to be Harrison Ford. Sean Connery's gone. Sean Connery was number one. He passed away, R.I.P. But definitely
real 007.
The real 007. You're right. So let's talk about your coaching. Let's talk about what you specialize in. The reason we're connected is because I've been really diving in hard to the masculine, the feminine, the balance. I do believe in balance. Okay. I mean, we have to have our men. I'm seeing a lot of this shift. There's this weird societal cultural shift where men are terrible, women are everything. And I'm not saying this mean, but it's not even a feminist movement. It's beyond that. It's like, let's tear down the men to build up the women. That doesn't work. And I'm seeing it. I'm like, that's not how we balance. As a woman, we need our women. We need that feminine energy, but we also need the balance of the masculine. So let's talk about your coaching and what would be your passion? If I could say, what is the biggest thing you're passionate about right now and what you're helping?
Yeah, I mean, I have several passions, but just on that point there, you're right that it's a massive autocorrect that is happening more out of a knee-jerk reaction from a place of fear, and that overcorrection is rife in all our society at the moment. Well, my passions really, for me, it's helping the individual first to become aligned, right? So it's their alignment now. Not to use that word lightly either, because it is banned around in the spiritual communities quite a lot. Oh, you're in alignment. It's a full-on process, and really the first sort of step is to go inward, and that can be a very dark place. That's where our limiting beliefs are about us. That's where our traumatic experiences are. That's where all the things that we don't like, and in particular, men, shame is the veneer that keeps a lot of the trauma down. And it's very difficult for men to express at that level. So, my passions really are, first and foremost, giving the tools and the knowledge in the capacity of emotional literacy. You got to learn your ABCs of emotions before you get emotionally intelligent, right? And so there is a process to that. So my passions really would lie in the individual first, to go inward and really to find their inner gold. And to start to sort of integrate that into the real world. Now, conversely with that, as a balance, I do love, and I'm very passionate about supporting women, and I do that through my program Unleashed, and it's a one-on-one coaching program that I take them through, and that is both rewarding but also such a great teacher for me as well. I'm a massive believer that there are masculine and feminine energies in both men and women, and it's when we're able to integrate in a healthy, balanced way either within us. Like, for example, I went for 10 years in the Marines, and there was no chance that I could ever access my feminine qualities, be it creative, being a creative person, being able to express emotions, because that was immediately seen as weakness. So, there was a half of me that was cut off in that whole experience, I later learned. And it's been a journey for me to sort of reawaken that other half and integrate that into my life. And, likewise with women, they've got this potency about them as well that's innate, as well as a vast, I really see the feminine. I often describe this with the metaphor in terms of energies as like the masculine is the boat, okay, and the feminine is the ocean. And, we often, as men, we've got to make sure that the boat is at least got no holes in it. It's reliable. It has a rudder. It knows where it's going. It has direction. It has a compass. And, we then have to understand that we are in a sea, a feminine ocean, if you will, and that, storms are going to come. It's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be vast. It's going to be, creator of life, taker of life. It's a deep concept, the feminine. And, the man should learn not to judge when a wave comes and sort of, takes the ship. He's got to learn to sort of navigate that and not judge it as right or wrong. It just is. That's just the force of nature, that is the feminine. So, that's a metaphor that I often use to sort of illustrate the dynamics, the relational dynamics within, whether you're in an intimate relationship or not, it doesn't matter. Just two people coming together can be very potent and in group settings.
It's interesting. Our intimacy has been coming up a lot in my life, and like challenges with friends, and intimacy is something. I was in a marriage for, together 17 years, marriage 15. So I didn't really have these moments where I was dating. I never was a dater. I always had a relationship. But something I'm noticing within my friends group, because I have a lot of single women now that are, kind of radiating to me and talking to me. The big one is intimacy with men. And something I think women, and I've done this, is we're giving way too much credit. And I'm not trying to be mean to men. Like, we're expecting something of them. And they're over here in this different world, like simple, 1, 2, 3. And we're like, well, you should be here. And why don't you understand me? One of the things was being intimate sober. I'm newly sober as well, but even for a regular person, many people will use something to be able to be intimate. And I think that's an interesting topic if you're willing to go down that road.
Absolutely.
Because it's been coming up within my friends group, personal experiences where I'm like, wow, you know, I've had to relearn my whole body for this year, being sober and everything. But I didn't realize how many people, not with issues, that really haven't had intimacy without help. And they don't understand how to be intimate. So let's talk about that, because I think there's a lot of men who listen to this, by the way. There's a lot of men who tune in. Let's help not only men, but women understand too, because I was putting way too much on people. I'm like, well, don't you understand this? It's like, wait. Come back down and let's have a different conversation, because we need to get on the same page. I think this is a big topic, and guys, especially guys, don't want to talk about it, but they definitely need help, and they listen if they have the right voice.
It's huge. It is huge. And I feel like there is a big part of this is the numbing. Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, we're bombarded and oversensitized, right? Our attention is everywhere, and it's everywhere and nowhere. So, you know, focus, presence, right? For me, if you want to be intimate, first learn the art of presence, you know, and to fully be in that moment with that person, sober especially, with no numbing, with no uppers, no downers, nothing to disturb the natural energy flow exchange between one person and another. That is intimacy. That can be done with a woman, that can be done with another man, it doesn't matter. It's that. So for me, presence is something that needs to be practiced, you know? It's like an exercise. It's like a muscle that needs to be exercised. And yeah.
We're gonna break this up, because there's something that I just thought of. There has been, how many times do you, even if you're on a date or if you're with someone, it could be another woman, another man, it's not about even being close that way, but they're like this talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
They're scrolling. And it's like, wait, but here's what I've learned. I try my best, and I work from my phone, but when I'm having a dinner, when I'm trying to get to know someone, that phone is face down and on silent. Because there's nothing that drives me more crazy is when I see somebody doing that and I'm having a conversation. I'm like, you don't even want to listen to me. And they're so distracted that it's like, we gotta cut all that out. So I'm on the same page with you. Like, I think it's sad to see people, even when you're out, if you actually people watch, they're not listening to each other. They're not.
They're absolutely not. And it's just given them another outlet for their numbing. It doesn't have to be drugs. It doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be distractions. It could be, you know, like I said, it's very difficult for people to be present these days. And there's so many temptations. I mean, I learned this the hard way through my own marriage for 10 years, who, you know, I had 2 beautiful sons with that woman, but unfortunately, we weren't able to keep that relationship together. And I know that I was not present. I know that I was emotionally shut off for one reason or another, complex PTSD. I was, whenever my emotions were coming up, I would zone out. And that became my habit. That became my escapism. So I know I wasn't present, and I know that causes pain, you know, for the opposite partner. So yeah, I mean, it's tied in with presence is almost like making it, there's not enough ritual. There's not enough sacredness around it anymore. You know, there is no sacred moments. Like I've got a beautiful Rhodesian Ridgeback dog, and I go, you know, and walk him every day in the woods. And there's this beautiful oak tree, and you know, I go past that oak tree, I touch it, I just stop whatever I'm doing, because often I'm listening to a podcast, I'm busying myself from A to B. I'm also on my phone a lot working, you know, and so that moment every day, at least twice a day, it's like I touch the tree, I ground in, I just look up to it, and I'm like, wow, this is a really old tree, or whatever, man. You just get in that presence of like, I'm with this tree right now. Yeah. And you know, you don't have, it's impossible to do it every minute, but there are those moments that you can sort of steal in the day. You know, when your husband or your wife or your partner or whoever comes home, those sort of threshold moments, they arrive. It's like, you know, how often do you see it in films even? Like, you know, people walk in, it's like, hi, and they're off, you know? It's like, no, steal those moments, make a cup of tea or a coffee together, you know, just like ritualize, put some ritual in your life. I think that's intentionality, ritual. These are the ingredients or the supporting sort of foundations for presence, you know? And intimacy, it will come from that. Intimacy will be what is born out of that presence in that moment. And I'm also newly single, and I've made a declaration to myself to explore my own intimacy and improve that relationship to that. And it comes in all forms once you make that declaration as well. You know, there's opportunities to do it all the time. So yeah, it's a vastly important topic, and unfortunately it's up against some serious competition when it comes to distractions and you know, society at large. You know,
it's nuts. The dating scene, which I'm not really in, but even though I'm not in it, I'm like, whoa. I mean, I watch my girlfriends go through it, and I'm like, it's wild, because you are competing with social media, and you're competing with, you know, so for me, you know, I was with my husband before Facebook. Okay. And there was none. And then I'm on Facebook, and it's my main platform. But now, you know, we have Instagram, all the things, like, it's just like whatever, you know, I'm 40. So the age group for me is Instagram or Facebook. But it's interesting because the level these women and men you see, Insta famous and all that stuff, I'm like, that isn't real. And that doesn't mean I want to put it down, because I give everyone credit for going out there, doing your thing. But I think for me, I've gone through a weird stage of insecurity where my insecurities have been so tapped into. I've never been an insecure person. Like, I have moments, but I've never been the woman who'd be like, oh my God, I don't look good. I just never. But when you lose a partner, when you lose a friend, and then you're thrown into this world where you're not familiar, it's wild. So, I mean, I understand where you're at too. It's like, what do we do? How do we navigate this? I'm not going to be on a dating app. I'm not going to do that stuff. That's not my style. I'm very old school. So I definitely hear you with like the distractions, because it's crazy, and everyone's talking to everyone. And I'm like, I don't want to be that way. You did mention one thing, though, that I do want to talk about, because we both, I mean, mine, and this is something I have to be careful of saying. I've had PTSD. I've had a couple times, and I used to downplay it, and I was embarrassed of it, because I'm like, I'm not a soldier. I didn't fight in war. But we have to allow people as well, because trauma is trauma. Because somebody did something maybe society thinks is worse, or, you know, has been through worse. We have to allow people to say, I've had trauma. And I used to hold that back, and I wouldn't talk about it. So I know that you said you had PTSD. If you're willing to talk about that, how did you go from Marine to this? What was the turning point? You said there was a person who came into your life, but also was there something else that happened? Obviously, you've suffered some traumas. So if you're willing to open up about that, it'd be...
Yeah, I mean, my journey with trauma, my awareness around trauma is a fairly recent discovery. I'd say 4 years, right? Before I was in the spaces and the communities that were discussing trauma. And even at that time, I never considered myself someone who had PTSD. I just didn't have enough reference points. And you raise a very important point. I was among, you know, I was in the alphas of the alphas. I was in a recon unit, and those guys, some of my friends got into some serious trouble and some serious, you know, situations. I have a dear friend, Mark Omrod. He's the first triple amputee of the Afghan war, you know, and he's now a very inspirational talker and incredible guy. And he's got his own journey of how he's dealt with it, right? And his mindset is his tool, which he uses to great effect. But for me and for many, many others, that on the face of it, we look like we're not wounded, right? On the outside, physically not wounded. It took a while for the collective sort of consciousness to sort of agree that actually, you know, just because they're not physically wounded doesn't mean they're not wounded, right? And it's very, I remember just kind of sucking it up and just going, well, I'm lucky, I'm blessed, I'm grateful, nothing happened to me, I'm good. And how could I possibly be like, you know, depressed or anxious right now, or whatever this is that's going on inside of me, right? Compared to those guys. So there was all of that. And So the comparison game, and this goes for anything, like the moment we start comparing ourselves in a negative way, we're up against struggle. And so, in all of this, my turning point, like you said, when I met this woman who then became my lover, and we just recently consciously uncoupled. So that's another story. But she basically, what I said in the beginning, I found my life, I found who I was, but purely because she was calling me to be authentic. Now, authenticity is when you are in your alignment, when you're being authentic. Now, it's incredibly challenging to arrive at a place of authenticity because we all want to fit in, right? That's just a natural process. We all want to fit in. But there's extremes of fitting in. Like when I was in the military, I had to create a persona, right? Because my ego was, it was scared. I was in an environment, I was like, oh my God, like this is a threatening environment. In order to survive, I created a persona, the hard man. I used to do all the martial arts, all the boxing, all everything, all the drink, anything that was a challenge, I was like straight for it. Like, yep, I've got to prove myself, right? I've got to prove myself above everyone else. So my ego was like scared, and I created a persona. And now I realize that, a lot of people navigate that way. They create these personas in order to survive, right? But they're not authentic. So I often describe it as if you're an authentic self, you're in alignment with your values, with your true purpose, life, and you know who you are, you understand your traumas, you understand everything about yourself, or as much as you can. Anything that's off track from that, anything that's deviated from that, where you're not being authentic, just to fit in or to prove something to someone or someone else, or you're running away from your actual trauma, you don't want to face it, and you go in this opposite direction. Well, the gap between your alignment where you're supposed to be and where you are, in the gap, that's anxiety. That's where depression is. That's where, addiction is. That's where addiction is a big one. Like whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, gaming, serial dating. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Anything that distracts us from facing the hard truth, which is, in order to be authentic, in order to come into alignment, you're going to have to do the hard work. And the hard work is shadow work, and shadow work is all about going there, rolling your sleeves up and going there and feeling the emotions, and that's a scary process for some. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's scary for people who were told or grew up in an environment that feelings are bad. And many of us did. Okay. So we have in a perspective, somebody brought this perspective to me, and I 100% agree with it, but you don't have to. You have to realize we come from generations that came. So my grandparents were Great Depression. They hoarded. They saved everything. My dad had the same mentality. My mom still has it, even though she was 10 years younger than my dad. Her parents were from that. So my family was save everything, hoard everything. There was that mindset where there's no time for feelings. There was no time to talk about alcoholism, although it was rampant in her family. No time. And there was no time to talk about being abused or things. And as we've kind of evolved in this next generation, what I'm seeing, like our children, there's pros and cons to everything that's going on in the world. But my kids talk about feelings, and my daughter understands. My middle daughter talks about, traumas and, all these different things that I would have never talked about when I was her age. And it's because, when we can give them the environment where it's okay to feel, that's so important. But if we don't heal our traumas, and I know I'm preaching the choir, we can talk about this, our children will take on our traumas. And I will tell you, I have just spent years healing my father's trauma. Years. And that was his. And I was taking it on. Shame. I mean, shame was the number one. I didn't even know why I had shame around so many things. I'm like, this is my dad's shame. I mean, it took, and you have to go through the work. Like, so many people are so afraid to feel that's where the numbing comes in, obviously. And you see all this stuff. So,
Yeah. There's maybe a good time now. I want to sort of inject a mechanism by which these traumas get compounded or hidden. So in my work with hypnosis, I do inner child work and regression, and there's the FreeMind is the methodology that I use, and with FreeMind there's 3 pillars: peace, power, and purpose. And peace is arriving at inner peace with emotional intelligence, but essentially we do regression and we go and meet those parts of us that experienced particular events. And the mechanism, if you can imagine, say, a 7-year-old. Okay, a 7-year-old experiences something untoward from their caregivers, from their main caregivers or parents. Now that child in that developmental stage, they will experience something negative. Maybe they got smacked. Maybe they got ignored when they cried for something. It could be something. It could be as little as that child asking for attention and the parent was on the phone, say, distracted. Right, those no moments. So what happens in that instant? That child will look at that and go, well, my caregivers purely be out of survival. I need them to be loving, supportive. I rely on them, right? 100% survival. Now, if they're behaving that way and they're not showing me that love, that care that I need in this moment, then there must be something wrong with me. So that child does that little mental gymnastics, and comes to the conclusion that because they're perfect, and they need to be, otherwise that truth that they're not perfect is devastating for a child. Mm-hmm. When that child thinks, oh my God, I'm all alone in the world because my parents are not here, that's devastating. So a lesser of 2 evils is to think that what's wrong is with the child. So they develop this mechanism where it's like, I'm not worthy, or, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved, but that's okay. My parents are still there. And they maintain that toxic relationship for survival. And it's a wonderful survival mechanism. And we do end up reaching adulthood and we've survived. But those moments get compounded and they have more and more of those moments. And that's what complex PTSD essentially is. Now, the kicker to all of that's all well and good if that was just a mental mechanism that happens, but it's not. Each of those moments gets stored in our body as a traumatic experience. And our nervous system, whenever it's in a traumatic experience, whether that's as an adult or as a kid, activates. And we have 4 responses to the traumatic experiences. We fight, we flee, or we fight, freeze, fawn, and I've lost the 4th one, it's getting late. Fight, freeze, crikey. Why am I?
You're doing great.
Yeah, I'm trying. This is going to be edited anyway, can't it? Right? Yeah.
It is going to be edited. You're good.
Hang on, let me just back on track. So it's fight, freeze, fawn, and because man. Anyway, I'll have to come back to it. But essentially, our nervous system will respond in one of four ways.
Right.
And that mechanism becomes your habitual behavior to trauma. Now, the problem with complex PTSD that is very often that the nervous system never switches off survival mode. So it's constantly activated, right? So it's constantly in the survival mode. And so that causes, that's like hyper stress all the time. So that's one of the mechanisms by which at a young age we begin to learn all these like limiting beliefs about ourselves, and it's trauma that needs to be looked at and healed. And luckily there are processes out there that you can do that,
Let's talk a little bit about your processes. So you use hypnosis, you work with men and women. Let's just go into what you do, because I think people are going to be looking for you after this anyways, but I want to talk about what you do specifically. So for women, you're a man, clearly, mm-hmm. and you're helping women. Let's talk about that aspect first, because it's a different world when you come in and you have a woman, mm-hmm. and you obviously have to build trust. So what can you do specifically for women that's really helping them get through these processes quickly, safely? What's your mechanism and what are you using?
Yeah, I mean, you've said it already. So building that foundation of trust, right? And that's fundamental. And it took a while. Basically, my early clients were all referral based. And, it went from the relationship that I had with Faye, my partner, And she was like, look, I helped her out through some of her darkest moments, and the thing about it is that it's not just a case of showing trust once. It's every time. And by that I mean, if a woman expresses, fully expresses, however she wants to express as well, by the way, right? If a man can hold that expression, fully receive that expression, without collapsing into his own boy traumas, right? That's the first goal. And if he manages to do that, he then doesn't go to the fixer mode, right? I mean, if that in itself is like, I help the guys that I coach to get to that level, right? That's golden if you can do that for a woman. So when a woman experiences a man receiving her full expression, and it could be vile as well, it could be directed at him, but most of the time it's like directed at an archetype. The man represents like all men at that moment or whatever, right? A behavior. And so that woman is expressing like hell, and the man just like holds that and maybe connects emotionally to her and just allows it to move through him without the need and desire to fix her, to offer her solutions and all the rest of it, right? And so if you can do that, which is not easy, but if you can do that, that is a little test of trust. And so that's one aspect of it. But for me, presence comes into it again when they're communicating, and I'm always asking questions that are really just wanting to get to the core root beliefs, because like I can hear what they're telling me sometimes, and I know it's in the story narrative. They're narrating a story, hoping that it stays logical and kind of like, well, then they did that, and I suppose it's it's okay that they did that, and I'm like, whoa, keep going deeper. There's more. There's beliefs under that, and then when you get to the second layer of these like beliefs, we can then question like, where do those beliefs come from, right? And then we can go to the third layer of like, and now we understand where the origins of your beliefs and your narratives that you've been carrying with you and the stories that you're telling yourself every day, they may not be serving you. They may not even be true. They may not even be yours, right? So it is a process of holding them in that space. And while we're in that space, it's for me, emotional fitness. So it's about developing emotional fitness as well as emotional intelligence and awareness. Like, emotional fitness is how quickly can you experience a traumatic emotion, feeling, thought, and then come back to a baseline of love, self-love, and peace. Like, how quickly can you do that? And for some, they've never experienced that level of like peace and love and self-love. So, that's really your emotional fitness. And so in that space, I would, often go where the emotion is and support them with meditation and hypnosis. And we would traverse down under hypnosis into the emotion, the feeling and the sensation, and really practice that over and over again, going into the emotion, going into the feeling, into the body, and dropping out of the mind into the body, and allowing the body to inform, and for the trauma to even inform us. If we can get, to the trauma that quickly, sometimes it takes a little while. There's other mechanisms there. One of the first mechanisms is the protector. Now, the protector is something that we personify in this practice. And the protector is there to protect you from that original truth that I mentioned earlier, that your parents let you down, that actually your parents were bad parents in that moment, right? For whatever reason. Yeah, they were trying their best. They were putting, a roof over your head, food on the table, but we're not there yet. We cannot do that yet. We have to go to that inner child that experienced that trauma, and the protector mechanism stops the adult from hearing that truth, because the protector's like, no, you can't handle this truth. You still can't handle this truth. You couldn't handle it when you're 7. Now you're 40. You still can't handle it. So I'm doing a great job here, and I'm going to sabotage all your relationships. All right. I'm going to make you think that you're not worthy. Right. But it's all for your own good because I'm protecting you from that truth. Remember? So that's happening. Right. So under hypnosis, we visit that protector and we build a relationship with the protector. And we say, hey, I'm an adult now. I've got this, but that may take several sessions before the protector mechanism, which is like the back of the brain here, which is where the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. There we go. I remembered it now. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn mechanisms are activated. That's the protector, right? So once we get past the protector and we build a relationship with them and go deep, then we can access the inner children beyond that veil. And, that is a beautiful experience where, my women and men, we go and meet their inner children that experience those no moments, those bad moments, those traumatic experiences. And really there I see such rapid transformation because it's literally like rescuing those little parts and giving them permission to have a voice. And it's there that typically anger is a common one. Like women and anger, it's like, oof, there's rage actually. I come across a lot of rage. And again, how do women express rage? Like in society, how can you? Like where do you go to express rage? Right? Without having all of this societal projection of like, oh, she's lost it, or like stay away from her, kind of thing. And it's really just, like I said, boys not being able to handle the feminine expression. So yeah, that gives a sort of insight to that. But then we progress. There's a natural progression, and you begin to see the empowerment coming in, right? And they begin to have these more peaceful moments throughout their day, and that begins to increase. And so their emotional resilience is getting better and better. Then we sort of transition into the empowerment stage, and that is all about reprogramming the words, the voices in your head. What are you telling yourself on a regular basis? This is more kind of fun and energetic, and goddess language starts coming in at that stage. It's like important, and I use a lot of mythology. I use a lot of archetypal language. Because it gets past the brain, the cognitive, and it goes into like the storytelling aspect of things, and it really gets to our heart. So I use a lot of that, those concepts, and Jung, Carl Jung, was the grandfather of Jungian psychology, and he used archetypes to a great effect. And you can, I mean, I've experienced it myself several times. You can inhabit, like it's like the spirit of an archetype. You can inhabit it and become it. Whether that's a queen, whether that's, a priestess, whether that's a magician, whether that's a king, a warrior. These are very useful archetypes because archetypes are just like concepts that we all understand. And you can allow the spirit of that to sort of come into your body, and you can imagine yourself just standing taller and prouder and stronger. So that's like the empowerment stage, and that's like pillar 2 stuff. And then pillar 3 for me is the cherry on top, and it's about transcendence. And it's about oneness psychology. And that really begins to pull out of that person their purpose. So, they're now free of all the limiting beliefs. They now feel empowered and energized and want to go after the day. And now they begin to tap into purpose. And it's like, you try and go after purpose without fixing all like your self-sabotaging behaviors. It's like you can have all the strategies in the world. And this is what I learned. As soon as I was a coach, I found these limits to my life coaching qualification. I was like, why are they sabotaging themselves? Why are they not? I don't understand why they're not following through with all the strategies and the goals and that I've set them. And then once I understood the full picture, it's like, right, now it makes sense. So you got to liberate yourself enough from your limiting beliefs in order to feel empowered, and then the purpose will, you can really aim for that purpose. Then
It's interesting. And by the way, I know Chris is listening, and I'm listening, and I'm going, and we're intrigued in this. This is like very good, very deep. We love everything you're saying. One of the things that I'm going to go back a little bit on is emotional intelligence. I talk about it all the time. But I like that you said mental fitness, because it's interesting. In my line of work, we're team building, we're doing things, and people hire coaches all the time. And I'm like, the reality is, in our industry, you can hire someone specifically to teach you the core basics of what we do, like how to recruit people, how to do that. but that's not what you need. Most people need inner child work and healing. They need to master emotional intelligence. And I don't mean you have to be a master instantly, but you have to be working on it every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I will tell you, when I first got started in entrepreneurship, I was the most reactive, and I still have my moments. But now when I have a moment, my mental fitness comes in. I'm like, how quickly can I come back out of this? What is really bothering me? And so I love that you hit on that, because our listeners, they're really looking for like, holy cow, that's a lot. You're dealing with a lot. You've got your 4 pillars, you've got your pillars. But in reality, I like that you said your purpose can't come until you handle all this other stuff. There are people, including myself, who used to work on everything but the one thing I needed to work on. I could look fabulous. I could cut fat. I could be bodybuilder ready or photo ready. Everything revolved around my image because I could control that. But what was really going on inside, and I know a lot of people do that, what was really going on side, I'm like, I feel rejection constantly. And I always expose myself to everyone. Rejection is always on the forefront in the last year. I'm like, why do I constantly feel rejected? Last week, I was having a conversation with some incredible people. And as I was sitting there listening, I'm like, I know why I feel rejected. My parents left me all the time by myself when I was like 5 and 6, all the time. But I was like, that is where it comes from. I was constantly left. So even though I didn't like cry about it, I was more like, now I'm aware. Now I have to go do the work to heal that child and tell her it's okay, you are loved. And, work with people like you to get in and heal that so I can get back to my purpose.
Yeah.
And the mental fitness is where people need to get. So it can be overwhelming. Somebody's listening to this going, I'm not even close to any of that. So let's talk about that. How can fear will take over and tap into all the things we talked about? And that's what's happening as well. So we have big things in this world tapping into our fears.
Right.
And we need to be strong, heal, and be awakened and aware to get through them. And we need people like you. So honestly, thank you so much. You got me. I was engaged. You have a podcast as well. So let's talk about that before you go. How can people find you? What is your podcast? And we're going to be hearing more from you. This is fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's, there's so many rabbit holes we could have gone down for hours, I'm sure. But the easiest way is Instagram, the classic. Ads Gornall, ADS Gornall, and that's GORNALL. And I have the link tree there in the bio, and then people can actually go to that link tree, and there's an EQ test that you can take. It's free. You can go there and you can just get an idea, awareness, right? Start the awareness, the journey of emotional intelligence through this test, and it will give you a score, and it will tell you a little bit about what that means. So that'll be a good place to go. But that'll be the easiest thing for people to reach out to me through there.